I just stepped off the plane literally moments ago from my last paranormal investigation in India. And let me tell you, it was wild. If you haven't seen that video yet, do yourself a favor, pause this one and go check it out. Ghosts, curses, ancient spirits. Yeah, it got real, but now I'm back on American soil and ready to dive headfirst into something that might just be even scarier. The haunted streets of New York. As soon as I landed, I called my wife and said, "Babe, I'm in New York." She goes, "Okay, when are you coming home?" And I said, define home. Because let's be honest, New York is huge and it's absolutely crawling with haunted places. I'm going to be gone a while. I packed enough socks, snacks, and EMF detectors to last me through at least a dozen ghost encounters and maybe one Broadway show if I get lucky. Now listen, this city isn't just about yellow taxis and dollar pizza. It's got centuries of spooky history buried under every cobblestone. I mean, this is the place where Revolutionary War ghosts hang out next to subway spirits. If ghosts had a Times Square, it would be here. So I'm lacing up my boots, charging up the night vision cameras, and prepping for whatever New York decides to throw at me. If it's cold, I'll shiver. If it's haunted, I'll scream. If it's both, well, that's just another Tuesday for me. And you know I wouldn't have it any other way. In this first part of the New York series, I'm going to take you with me to some of the creepiest, most bone-chilling spots this city has to offer. Abandoned hospitals, haunted mansions, forgotten cemeteries, you name it. If it has a ghost story, I'm there with a flashlight and way too much caffeine. So grab your sage, turn off the lights, and buckle up. Because this isn't just another ghost video. This is the start of something big. This is part one of the most haunted places in New York. Let's get spooky, let's get weird, and most importantly, let's survive the Empire State. One haunted location at a time. Welcome to Screamville. Technically, this place is called Forest Park Cemetery, but good luck finding anyone who calls it that. Around here, it's known as Pine Woods, named after Pine Woods Avenue, where it creeps quietly behind its trees like it's got something to hide. And guess what? It does. Back in the day, this cemetery was a lot bigger, until it started shedding land like a haunted snake losing its skin. Big chunks were sold off to the nearby Troy Country Club because nothing says relaxing golf game, like being next to a ghost playground. Now it's down to a spooky 22 acres, which is apparently just enough space for some serious paranormal weirdness. Drive by, and you'll see a generous helping of no trespassing signs, which basically scream, "Don't even think about it." Cops patrol the area like it's the VIP section of the afterlife. And with the amount of damage caused over the years by curious thrill seekers, let's just say the cemetery's had enough drama to last an eternity. No pun intended? Okay, maybe a little intended. So what exactly makes Pinewood spine-chilling enough to keep ghost hunters and local cops on their toes? Let's begin with the Headless Angel. Yes, you heard that right. Decapitated statues are kind of a thing here. The most infamous one is said to bleed from her neck at night. Who knew granite could be so vascular? Despite the risks, this statue is like a goth influencer. Everyone wants a selfie with her. Paranormal photos snapped here are often bursting with orbs, which some believe are spirits, and others say are just your phone saying, "Hey, maybe don't take pics of haunted things." This isn't the only headless statue in Pinewoods. One statue is even rumored to occasionally have a head, which is either a supernatural event or a really committed game of now you see it, now you don't. If bleeding statues and reappearing heads weren't enough, let's talk about the so-called Gateway to Hell. Yes, that's a real nickname tossed around for this place. The weirdness cranks up a notch near the old receiving tomb, which you can spot peeking through the trees like it's photobombing your nightmares. Visitors brave enough to walk the wooded path have reported being scratched, shoved, or otherwise ghost-handled by something invisible. And in a modern twist, your phone battery? It starts draining faster than your will to keep walking. Coincidence? Maybe. Spooky? Absolutely. Oh, and for years, this cemetery was featured in Life magazine as one of the top 10 most haunted places in America. But honestly, it doesn't even need the bragging rights. This place is straight up nightmare fuel with or without a magazine spread. Welcome to Rolling Hills Asylum. Nothing says dream vacation like a former 19th century poorhouse turned paranormal hotspot. Tucked away in chilly East Bethany, New York, Rolling Hills started its eerie journey in the frosty winter of 1826. Back then, it was known by its slightly less catchy name, the Genesee County Poor Farm. Let's be real, poor farm sounds like the place your grandma threatened to send you when you wasted food. So, what exactly was a poor farm? Think of it as a government-sponsored mashup of a group home, rehab center, jail, orphanage, and low-budget farm, all rolled into one fun location. It was meant to house orphans, widows, the mentally ill, people with disabilities, and even a few petty criminals. Everyone who stayed was called an inmate, which really set the tone because nothing says compassionate care like lumping a 10-year-old orphan and a pickpocket into the same category. And yes, it was an actual working farm. Residents, inmates, grew crops and took care of animals. Not out of love for agriculture, mind you, but because child labor laws were more of a future concept. The buildings had that charming reformatory look, which made it feel less home sweet home and more Netflix true crime series waiting to happen. These kinds of facilities were all the rage in the 1800s and early 1900s before things like Social Security and basic human rights ruined the vibe. There's also a cemetery somewhere on the grounds where people who died without family were buried by the county. The only problem, no one knows exactly where it is anymore. The headstones have basically crumbled into oblivion, as if even the spirits were like, nope, not hanging around here forever. When the place opened in 1827, the Batavia Times put out an ad that read like the 19th century version of Craigslist. Now accepting paupers, must bring own beds, clothes, and miscellaneous sad belongings, accepting habitual drunkards, lunatics, the elderly, the blind, the broke, and anyone society has collectively decided to give up on. Yikes. Thankfully, we've come a long way in how we treat people in need. But Rolling Hills hasn't exactly gotten any less creepy. Over 1,700 documented deaths have occurred on the property, and who knows how many undocumented ones. Today, it's known as the second most haunted location in the entire United States. Which makes you wonder, what kind of nightmare fuel is lurking in first place? So if you're into ghost hunting, dark history, or just want to scream into the void with some spirits, Rolling Hills Asylum has a vacancy. Just don't forget your bedding. Rolling Hills Asylum isn't just a hotspot for ghost hunters. It's also home to some truly tragic tales, the kind that make your cold brew taste a little saltier with tears. Among them, one story stands out like a 7-foot-tall ghost in a dark hallway. Because that's exactly what it is. Let's talk about Roy. Roy had extreme gigantism, which made him tower over others at well over 7 feet tall, with oversized hands, feet, and a face shaped by his condition. But don't let the size fool you. Roy was basically a gentle giant with a heart bigger than his shoe size. He adored opera music, which feels like the classiest thing anyone's ever done in a haunted asylum, and was known for his kind and caring soul. Unfortunately, his family, charming folks, shipped him off to Rolling Hills at the age of 12 because they were embarrassed by him. That's right, the son of a prominent New York banker was cast aside like a tax write-off. He lived in the asylum for 50 years, passing away at age 62. But according to many, Roy never really left. Visitors have reported seeing his enormous shadow moving through the halls, like the world's friendliest and tallest ghost bouncer. And then there's the rat incident. Seriously, this one's something else. Sharon, the owner of Rolling Hills, once encountered a rat in the infirmary. She screamed like any rational person would, ran away, and hoped for the best. The next day, she found the rat, dead, blood leaking from its mouth, neck twisted, and a giant bloody handprint above it on the wall. Roy's ghost apparently wasn't having any of that rodent nonsense. Paranormal pest control, anyone? But not all spirits in Rolling Hills are as warm and fuzzy, or as helpful with pest problems. Enter Nurse Emmy, the resident nightmare fuel. This woman was so cruel she made Nurse Ratched look like Florence Nightingale. She allegedly dabbled in black magic and satanic rituals, because why settle for just being mean when you can go full horror movie villain? People still report hearing her creepy, cackling laugh echoing through the infirmary, which is not ideal for sleeping. Of course, Roy and the other residents tried to look out for each other the best they could, even while the staff was busy acting like extras from American Horror Story. Another ghostly local is Hattie, the star of what's now known as Hattie's Room. This room is on the first floor of the East Wing, and voice recorders have picked up an elderly woman repeatedly yelling, "Hello!" Legend says Hattie was blind and spent her days and nights shouting for attention. She might have been lonely, or just really committed to being the asylum's unofficial greeter. But if you're feeling brave or foolish, head on up to the second floor men's dormitory, aka Shadow Hallway. Why that name? Because shadowy figures casually stroll through doorways, peek around corners, and occasionally crawl across the floor like they lost their contact lens and all sense of human decency. It's basically a ghost version of The Floor is Lava, minus the fun. So, whether you're into tragic ghosts, murderous nurses, or overly enthusiastic hallway crawlers, Rolling Hills Asylum has something spooky for everyone. Just be polite to Roy. He might save you from a rat. If you're looking for the creepiest corners of Rolling Hills Asylum, look no further than the psych ward and solitary confinement. These areas aren't just spooky, they're straight-up nightmare material. Imagine walking into a cold, windowless room in the basement and seeing iron brackets sticking out of the concrete walls. Those weren't for hanging plants, folks. Nope, those were used to shackle people to the wall. Cozy, right? Sharon, the owner of the place, and apparently the bravest woman alive, points out that this dungeon of despair wasn't reserved for dangerous criminals. Oh no, it was more of a catch-all for anyone society didn't know what to do with. Got epilepsy? Into the shackles? Alzheimer's? Enjoy your new concrete suite. Tourette's? Asperger's? Slightly too enthusiastic about bird watching? Down to the basement you go. And if you were an unruly wife, well, congratulations. You just won yourself an all-expenses-paid stay in the psych ward. Back in the day, if a husband couldn't handle his wife, he could basically just say, "She's crazy." And boom, off she went to solitary confinement. No trial, no questions, just a one-way ticket to a padded room and a very grim version of me time. As Sharon bluntly and rightly puts it, this area was not good. Translation, it was the human rights version of a dumpster fire. So yeah, if walls could talk down there, they'd probably scream. If you're looking for the creepiest corners of Rolling Hills Asylum, look no further than the psych ward and solitary confinement. These areas aren't just spooky, they're straight-up nightmare material. Imagine walking into a cold, windowless room in the basement and seeing iron brackets sticking out of the concrete walls. Those weren't for hanging plants, folks. Nope, those were used to shackle people to the wall. Cozy, right? So yeah, if walls could talk down there, they'd probably scream. And yes, the morgue, because no haunted asylum is complete without a room full of fridges, formaldehyde, and really bad vibes. At Rolling Hills Asylum, the morgue is basically the VIP lounge for the paranormal. Inside, you'll find a massive embalming table because one size fits all. 2 industrial-sized refrigerators, not for snacks, unfortunately, and a giant steel sink that looks like it's seen way too much. This place is a paranormal playground. Visitors have reported items moving on their own, creepy whispers from nowhere, and in some cases, being physically shoved to the ground. So why is this place such a ghost magnet? Well, here's the theory. For many residents, this wasn't just an asylum, it was home. Some lost their families, others their homes, and a few probably just lost their patience with the outside world. But inside these walls, they found something. Friendship, love, maybe even a little peace, and not just the resting kind. They spent years here, built bonds, and endured a lot together. So, while the rest of us see Rolling Hills as a haunted hotspot with a side of horror movie energy, the spirits, they see a cozy little forever home with a familiar embalming table. Why would they want to leave? I mean, sure, there are other places with better lighting and less screaming, but ghosts love their routines. And if you were gonna haunt a place, wouldn't you pick the one where you had your people? Next up, we have the Dakota. Even the name evokes a sense of mystery, of whispers carried on the wind across vast plains. These days, the Dakota building in New York City is known as the tragic final home of John Lennon. But long before that, it was already making a name for itself as one of the most paranormally active places in the Big Apple. Lennon, who wasn't exactly shy about his interest in the weird and unexplained, once claimed to have spotted a UFO from his apartment window and also reported seeing the ghost of a weeping woman drifting through the hallways. He even gave her a name, the Crying Lady Ghost. And it's not just Lennon. Other famous residents have also had spooky run-ins. Maury Povich, yes, that Maury, once said the building was very haunted, and he even says, "You are the ghost." Get it? Never mind. Perched grandly at Central Park West and 72nd Street, the Dakota was constructed between 1880 and 1884 by Edward Clark, the sewing machine mogul behind Singer. Back then, the area was so deserted, it might as well have been actual Dakota territory, hence the name, which first popped up in a 1933 newspaper. As for the architecture, Think Gothic Germany meets fancy French Renaissance with a dash of English Victorian drama. Gargoyles, high gables, terracotta flair. It basically looks like a haunted castle that moonlights as a luxury apartment complex. The Dakota houses 65 co-op apartments, and fun fact, no two are alike. It's like a box of spooky chocolates. You never know what kind of ghost you're gonna get. The Dakota isn't just famous for its stunning architecture or celebrity residence. It's also basically a high-end ghost hostel. The building's haunted reputation goes back at least to the 1960s, but if you ask the ghosts, they've probably been there since the paint was still drying. Construction workers back then reported seeing an apparition with the body of a young man and the face of a little boy, basically a supernatural Photoshop fail. A few years later, painters working inside the building reported seeing a little girl dressed like she just stepped out of a Victorian yearbook. Unlike most horror movie ghost kids, this one was actually polite and cheerful, often smiling and waving like she was trying to welcome you to her playdate in the afterlife. She's apparently the Dakota's most frequently spotted spirit, and honestly might be the friendliest roommate some people have ever had. A group of painters saw a blonde girl in an old-timey dress bouncing a ball in the hallway. She wasn't a resident, wasn't a guest, and definitely wasn't part of the janitorial staff. Later, a woman waiting in the foyer saw the same little girl stroll into what she thought was another room, only to find out later it was a closet. Yep, she watched a ghost casually walk into a dead-end space. Closet or not, the ghost clearly needed some me time. After actress Judy Holliday passed in 1965, the Smiths moved in and hired painters to fix the place up. But instead of peace and quiet, the crew got the full haunted house package. One guy saw a kid in a Buster Brown suit from the early 1900s. Another painter swore he saw a man in his 20s with a baby face, weird combo. To top it all off, one poor soul got trapped in a closet when the door slammed shut and the lights went out, classic ghost prank. As if that wasn't enough, something grabbed his arm and made him touch a light bulb. Frederick and Suzanne Weinstein experienced everything from phantom footsteps to self-rearranging furniture. In one paranormal surprise party, Frederick saw a crystal chandelier lit up through the window that didn't exist. When he ran inside to compliment Suzanne on her excellent taste, the chandelier was gone, just the bolts remained. Even ghosts appreciate a dramatic exit. Nothing says run for your life like a snow shovel launching itself across a room. That's exactly what happened to a porter who called tenant Wilbur Ross down to see the haunted chaos. Garbage bags were moving on their own, and just as Ross started laughing it off, a metal bar flew across the room and landed by his feet like a supernatural mic drop. Then came the ghost of a short man with a beard, no mustache, bold choice, wireframe glasses, and a frock coat, aka 1800s ghost chic. Several others saw him too, and the description matched the building's original developer, Edward Clark, apparently doing rounds in the afterlife. In 1983, musician Joey Harrow claimed he saw John Lennon's ghost standing in the exact spot where he was tragically killed, surrounded by a glowing light, because even in the afterlife, Lennon knows how to make an entrance. He was with a writer, Amanda Moores, who also saw the ghost. She said, "I wanted to talk to him, but his look said, no," which is ghost for "I'm busy haunting right now." Other sightings came in over the years. Psychic Sean Robbins saw John inside the building, and Yoko Ono reportedly saw him at his iconic white piano. He looked at her and said, "Don't be afraid, I am still with you." Cue the tears and the goosebumps. According to spiritualists, John hung around for a while before a group of ghostly spirit guides helped him move on. Apparently, ghost onboarding is a real thing. But even after he passed into the next realm, some mediums claim he still pops by the Dakota from time to time like a rock star making surprise visits on his eternal farewell tour. The New York Public Library, a beacon of learning, a cathedral of literature. Its imposing marble facade, guarded by the stoic gaze of patience and fortitude, the iconic lion statues, has stood sentinel over Fifth Avenue for over a century. Millions have passed through its grand arches, seeking knowledge, solace, or simply a moment of quiet contemplation amidst the city's relentless energy. But behind the library's stately exterior lies a world of untold stories, some whispered in hushed tones, others etched in the very fabric of the building itself. For within these hallowed halls, amidst the towering bookshelves and the scent of aged parchment, linger whispers of the past. The New York Public Library is not just a repository of human knowledge, it is a vessel holding within its walls the residual energies of countless lives lived, stories told and secrets kept. And some say that those energies, unable to fully depart, manifest as something altogether more unsettling. The New York Public Library isn't just a place to borrow books, it's basically the Beyoncé of buildings in NYC. Iconic, classy, and full of character. But believe it or not, this literary landmark didn't start off with all the marble lions and grand staircases. It had humble beginnings that make its glow-up even more impressive. Back in the late 1800s, two well-meaning but financially frazzled libraries, the Lenox and the Astor, decided to join forces. Think of it as the Avengers, but for books. With a little help from Samuel J. Tilden, who generously left his fortune behind, talk about a legacy, they were able to start something big. His dream, a free and fabulous library for all New Yorkers. While Lenox and Astor were doing their best pre-NYPL, money troubles eventually had them tapping out. But instead of fading into obscurity, they pooled their resources and helped create the book-loving mega institution we now call the New York Public Library. And the rest, well, that's literary history. Sure, the creation of the New York Public Library might sound like a textbook tale of civic duty and literary love, but let's be real, nothing in New York is ever that simple. Let's start with the iconic Stephen A. Schwarzman building, nestled right in the heart of Bryant Park. A peaceful place to read, people watch, and sip overpriced coffee, right? Well, it used to be a potter's field, aka a mass burial ground for the unclaimed, the unfortunate, and probably a few people who annoyed the wrong person. For over 20 years, this was the resting place for the poor, the nameless, and the downright mysterious. Eventually, the graveyard was cleared out, or so they say, and the land became home to the Croton Reservoir, then Bryant Park, and finally the New York City Public Library. Translation: yes, you might be reading your favorite book while sitting on top of a skeleton. Welcome to New York, where real estate is scarce and ghosts are just part of the lease. But don't worry, this isn't unique. Washington Square Park, full of bones. Greenwich Village, ghosts galore. Basically, if you're in Manhattan and the ground feels a little squishy, just smile, say hi to the spirits, and keep it moving. When the library officially opened, it brought together the collections of the Lenox and Astor libraries. But the Astor Library didn't exactly leave its ghosts behind, literally. One librarian, Dr. Cogswell, already a name that screams haunted vibes, had a run-in with a spirit who apparently loved spooky books. According to a newspaper at the time, Dr. Cogswell spotted a ghostly physician browsing the occult section 3 times. And every time he tried to talk to him, poof, ghosted in the most literal way. Dr. Cogswell was promptly sent on a vacation, which is what old-timey HR did instead of therapy. The paper insisted his story was plausible, which is 19th century speak for, we don't know what he saw, but we're not touching it. Bet you didn't know some library branches used to have actual apartments hidden inside them. These weren't hip city lofts for aspiring novelists, though. They were built for custodians who needed to keep the place warm and running, back when radiators were scarier than spirits. While most of these apartments are now defunct, a few still exist in their dusty, abandoned glory. One branch was even described by staff as a haunted house. You know things are weird when librarians, the calmest humans on earth, start casually throwing around the word haunted. One guy, John Fedler Jr., actually grew up in the Schwarzman building's secret apartment. He recalled tales his dad used to tell, some to keep the kids in line, and others that were just plain eerie. According to Fedler Sr., the original superintendent, there was one ghost that stood out, a red-headed man who haunted the attic and reading room. His backstory? He was supposedly one of the 10 people who died during the library's construction. Yep, the building may have cost 10 lives, and you thought trying to find a seat was the hardest part of visiting. So next time you're deep in the reading room and you feel a chill or see a flash of red hair out of the corner of your eye, maybe don't investigate. Just keep reading. No haunted library breakdown would be complete without a nod to Ghostbusters. The very first movie opens inside the library, where a ghost scares a poor librarian half to death, or full on into retirement. The scene may be fictional, but it helped seal the library's reputation as a supernatural hotspot in pop culture, complete with sequels, video games, and board games. So next time you visit the New York Public Library, take a moment to appreciate its beauty, history, and literary riches, and maybe give a little nod to the spirits quietly flipping through books behind the scenes. After all, in a city built on stories, some of them just refuse to end. The oldest house in Manhattan isn't just hanging on by bricks and history, it's also clinging tightly to its ghosts. Welcome to the Morris Jumel Mansion, where the Wi-Fi might be weak, but the paranormal activity is strong. One of its most infamous residents? None other than Madame Eliza Jumel, a prostitute, actress, and full-time ghostly diva. Legend has it, she liked the mansion so much she decided dying wouldn't be reason enough to leave. Visitors and caretakers alike claim she still floats around. Her first husband, Stephen Jumel, also apparently missed the memo about moving on. He's still lurking too, though his ghost might be a little grumpier. Why? Because according to famed psychic Hans Holzer, who was called in after a curator heard ghostly moans that didn't sound like plumbing issues, Stephen didn't exactly die in a freak accident. During a seance, his spirit casually dropped the bomb that he fell on a pitchfork. But it was Eliza who yanked off his bandages and let him bleed out like a ghost soap opera villain. And if haunted marital drama isn't enough, the mansion's got a full Revolutionary War throwback party happening too. A spectral soldier has been spotted around the grounds, and a few curators and reporters have even seen a group of ghostly dudes in uniform throwing a dining room bash. On 2 separate field trips, school teachers watched in disbelief as an American soldier stepped out of a painting like he was auditioning for Ghosts the Musical. If you ever visit, don't worry, you won't be alone. The past is very much present, and it might just show up to dinner. Let's start with one of the more famous ghosts still roaming the halls. Aaron Burr. Yes, that Aaron Burr, the guy who shot Alexander Hamilton and then married Madame Eliza Jumel in his retirement years. Apparently, even in the afterlife, he's still head over heels. Burr is said to haunt the mansion, hopelessly pining for Eliza. We're not saying it's ghostly romantic, but if this place had Wi-Fi, he'd probably still be texting her. You up? And if that isn't dramatic enough, let's talk about the jilted maid. Legend has it she met a tragic end after being rejected. Some say she died by suicide in the house. She's most often spotted on the 3rd floor where the servants' quarters used to be, still lurking like it's part of her eternal job description. One poor woman who went exploring up there was so startled by the maid's ghost that she supposedly died of a heart attack. Built in 1765 by British Colonel Roger Morris, clearly a man with a thing for drama and architecture, the mansion came complete with a grand portico, Tuscan columns, because regular columns are too basic, and a fancy 2-story octagonal wing on the back. Yes, octagonal, because apparently ghosts need options. During the American Revolution, Roger and his wife Mary were like, yikes, America's not vibing with our royal ties, and pieced out to England. Right after that, George Washington moved in like it was Airbnb for generals. He used the place as his temporary headquarters in 1776, probably pacing around that octagon room trying to figure out how not to lose New York. Fast forward to the 1800s, Stephen Jumel and his wife Eliza bought the mansion in 1810. Stephen mysteriously died after that whole pitchfork situation, and Eliza decided to upgrade husbands and married Aaron Burr right there in the mansion's parlor. You can still visit the room where the wedding went down, and maybe hear the faint sound of Burr asking, "Was it something I said?" In 1903, the house was bought by New York State and officially became a National Historic Landmark in 1961. Since then, it's stood tall as one of Manhattan's most elegant, historic, and haunted homes. Basically the supernatural version of a Real Housewives mansion. Reed's Ice Cream Factory in Blue Point, Long Island, New York, has a storied past that intertwines industrial history with chilling legends. Established in the late 1800s, Reed's Creamery operated several ice cream parlors across New York. The Blue Point facility functioned as a production and storage site, supplying various Reed's locations until its closure in the 1920s. Post-closure, the building remained abandoned for decades, eventually being demolished in 2003. The factory's abandonment gave rise to numerous ghost stories, cementing its reputation as a haunted locale. In the late 1950s, a young woman named Linda, who worked at a nearby dance hall, reportedly left with a mysterious man after her shift. The next morning, her body was discovered near the factory, her throat severely slashed. Since then, locals have reported hearing screams and witnessing apparitions of a bloodied woman whose head appears to tilt unnaturally before vanishing. During the 1970s, a young boy is said to have been playing inside the abandoned factory when he fell from old machinery, leading to his death. Witnesses claim to hear childlike laughter and footsteps in the area, with some even believing the spirits harbor malevolent intent. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, the factory was plagued by unexplained fires. Demolition crews reported tools disappearing, doors locking on their own, and equipment malfunctions, leading some workers to abandon the project. The site was eventually cleared in 2003, making way for residential development. Even after the factory's demolition, reports of paranormal activity persist. Residents of the new homes built on the site have recounted unexplained phenomena, suggesting that the spirits associated with Reed's ice cream factory continue to linger. Tucked away in the peaceful tree-hugged hamlet of Thiels just west of Haverstraw and nestled in the rolling green shoulders of the Ramapo Mountains lies Letchworth Village, a place with charm, decay, and enough creep factor to make your grandmother's doll collection look like a Pixar movie. Just a short jaunt past humble farmhouses and not far from the blissful expanse of Harriman State Park, this place is where nature came in, shrugged and said, "Mine now." Originally designed as a progressive haven for the developmentally disabled, Letchworth was supposed to be a model institution, think Monticello with a spooky backstory. But instead of historic elegance, it slowly morphed into the setting of a paranormal Netflix special nobody asked for. Over time, the buildings fell into ruin, ivy went full Rambo, and the only thing left thriving was local ghost lore. Back in 1911, the place opened as the State Institution for the Segregation of the Epileptic and Feeble-Minded. Yeah, they weren't pulling any punches with that name. With two-story cottages and colonial flair, it was built on progressive ideas, fresh air, small populations, and absolutely zero mingling between the sexes. Mini Shungo Creek split the campus down the middle like some sort of Victorian chaperone, and everyone had their own spot, kids, adults, the infirm, all tucked away in their respective zones. It all sounds kind of quaint until you get to the dark part, because, of course, there's a dark part. Letchworth doubled as a human science lab. Children who couldn't consent or even pronounce consent were used for experimental medical procedures, including one of the first trials of the polio vaccine in 1950. As if that weren't enough, brain specimens were collected like baseball cards and stored in jars like they were prepping for the world's most messed up jam-making contest. It's a detail that makes even the boldest ghost hunter go, "Yeah, maybe we skip this hallway." Things went downhill fast. By 1942, Letchworth was bursting at the seams with double the intended residents, and the progressive care started to look more like horrifying neglect. Hundreds of patients slept in hallways or wherever there was space, some in day rooms, others basically in storage closets with a mattress and a dream. The overworked, underpaid staff did their best, which is to say, no one was thriving. Eventually, by the 1990s, society realized, hey, maybe isolating people in a spooky forest isn't the move, and the state began shutting it down. Most residents were moved to group homes, and in 1996, Letchworth finally closed its doors. Developers came sniffing around in 2004, eager to turn Ghost Town into condos. Unsurprisingly, the project stalled. 9 buildings did find new life, though. Fieldstone Middle School now operates smack dab in the middle of the ruins, which feels like the start of at least 6 Goosebumps books. Down Call Hollow Road, you'll find a humble sign for the old Letchworth Village Cemetery, pointing to a shady patch of woods where T-shaped grave markers stretch out like a somber game of tic-tac-toe. These graves, all unmarked, hold the remains of nearly 900 former residents whose families chose anonymity over remembrance. But there's a silver lining. A plaque now stands to honor these forgotten souls, bearing the words, "To those who shall not be forgotten." It's a small act of dignity in a place that saw far too little. Many visitors and paranormal enthusiasts claim to have experienced ghostly sightings and eerie sensations on the property. Some believe the spirits of those who suffered within its walls still linger. Just a few miles off the bustling island of Manhattan floats a far less glamorous 13-acre chunk of land in the East River, North Brother Island. Sounds cozy, right? Think again. This little island has a past that's more ghost tour than getaway. It all began when Riverside Hospital was plopped onto the island like an unwanted party guest, because it specialized in treating highly contagious diseases like smallpox, tuberculosis, yellow fever, and typhus. You know, just your standard horror movie lineup. The goal was noble: isolate the sick to protect the public. Unfortunately, it turned into more of a medical version of solitary confinement. Many patients were held there against their will, which definitely puts a damper on the whole get-well-soon vibe. The island's most infamous long-term resident? None other than Mary Mallon, aka Typhoid Mary, the original asymptomatic influencer. Mary unknowingly spread typhoid fever to over 50 people, 3 of whom died. She swore up and down that she wasn't sick, but authorities weren't buying it. So they gave her a one-way ticket to North Brother Island, where she spent nearly 30 years in forced quarantine until her death. Basically, the world's longest and least fun game of hide-and-seek with germs. Mary Mallon was born in 1869 in Ireland and made her way to the U.S. in 1884, chasing the American dream. Unfortunately, she brought Salmonella typhi along for the ride. She worked a variety of domestic jobs, but eventually settled into a career as a cook. And not just any cook, she whipped up meals for wealthy families like that of Charles Henry Warren. The only problem? She was unknowingly seasoning her dishes with a side of typhoid fever. Shortly after Mary started sautéing and simmering in the Warren household, 6 out of the 11 residents came down with typhoid fever. Back then, the disease had a 10% fatality rate, which made catching it less mild inconvenience and more deadly dinner guest. Enter George Soper, a sanitary engineer with the Sherlock Holmes complex. Hired by the Warren family to figure out why everyone was suddenly clinging to life, he first blamed some unlucky freshwater clams, justice for the clams. But as he poked around and interviewed everyone, Mary included, he realized she was a walking biohazard. In 1907, Soper cracked the case and made public the idea of the asymptomatic carrier. Translation: Mary was fine, but everyone around her, not so much. He then basically turned into a Victorian-era health department spy, stalking Mary through Manhattan in hopes of obtaining samples of her, bodily contributions. Unsurprisingly, Mary was not thrilled about someone chasing her for poop. After evading him for a while, it was eventually discovered that Mary had worked for 8 other families, all of whom ended up with typhoid fever after she started flipping their pancakes. When Soper presented his findings to Dr. Biggs of the New York Department of Health, the police got involved. Mary went full fugitive, dodging them for 5 hours before being dragged in for testing. Her stool tested positive for typhoid, and she was swiftly shipped off to North Brother Island for a very unglamorous quarantine. In 1909, Mary sued the health department, claiming no one had explained what being a carrier actually meant. Instead of treatment, she was given laxatives. Yep, that was their plan. And when offered gallbladder surgery, which might have solved the whole problem, she noped right out. Eventually, she was released on one condition: stay away from food. So naturally, she immediately went back to cooking. It was like Typhoid Fever, the sequel. This time, she took a job at Sloan Maternity Hospital in Manhattan, where she infected at least 25 people, 2 of whom died. Once again, she was caught and sent back to North Brother Island, where she lived out the rest of her life, until she passed away in November of 1938. Only after her death did doctors confirm that her gallstones were shedding the bacteria the whole time. So, that gallbladder surgery she refused in week 1? Yeah, that could have saved everyone a whole lot of grief. And while Mary Mallon, Typhoid Mary, may be the most famous resident of North Brother Island, she's far from the only reason the place is cloaked in eerie, haunted history. Just a stone's throw from the hustle and bagel-ridden bustle of Manhattan sits North Brother Island, a 13-acre chunk of land in the East River that looks like nature hit the abandon button. But don't let the overgrown ruins fool you. This place has a past that's juicier and more contagious than a soap opera set in a petri dish. Welcome to Riverside Hospital, where the patients check in but don't check out. North Brother Island first got its start when Riverside Hospital, a facility known for treating highly contagious diseases, was moved there. The goal? To isolate people suffering from smallpox, tuberculosis, yellow fever, typhus, basically every disease you'd never want to catch on public transit. Sounds noble, right? That is, until you find out many of the patients were not exactly willing guests. Let's just say the island had major no-escape energy. Enter the star patient, Typhoid Mary, aka the human biohazard. Now let's dig deeper into this story. The most infamous resident of this quarantine-cation destination once again is Mary Mallon, better known as Typhoid Mary. She holds the not-so-glamorous title of being the first documented asymptomatic carrier of typhoid fever in the U.S., which means she looked perfectly healthy while unintentionally spreading death like an overly enthusiastic casserole fairy. Who was Mary? Mary Mallon was born in 1869 in Ireland and came to America in 1884 in search of a better life, and unfortunately brought some very unwanted microscopic baggage. She bounced around doing various domestic jobs before settling into a gig as a cook for a wealthy gent named Charles Henry Warren. A curious career choice considering she was walking around like a five-star buffet of Salmonella typhi, the bacteria behind typhoid fever. Unsurprisingly, 6 out of 11 people in the household fell ill shortly after Mary picked up the ladle. At the time, typhoid fever was fatal in about 10% of cases. So when people started mysteriously dropping like flies, the Warren family hired sanitary engineer George Soper to investigate. This guy basically became the Sherlock Holmes of poop. At first, Soper suspected contaminated clams because, of course, but soon zeroed in on Mary. She was asymptomatic but highly contagious, making her the original influencer. Only instead of selling skincare, she was unknowingly handing out infectious diseases. He tried to get samples of her bodily fluids, but Mary was not having it. It wasn't until he traced 8 other families she had worked for, all of whom had typhoid outbreaks, that he cracked the case wide open. After convincing Dr. Biggs from the NYC Health Department, the police were called in. Mary, refusing to cooperate, played an impressive game of hide-and-seek that lasted 5 hours before they finally caught her, and took those long-awaited samples. Surprise, surprise. Her stool tested positive for Salmonella typhi. Off to North Brother Island she went. Mary was quarantined and treated with laxatives, yes really, which didn't work. Shockingly, poop wasn't the cure for poop-related illnesses. She was even offered gallbladder surgery to stop the spread of bacteria, but declined. After 3 years, they let her go on one very important condition. She had to stay away from food prep forever. Mary said, sure, then promptly changed her name and went right back to cooking like nothing happened. She worked at Sloan Maternity Hospital where, surprise, another outbreak occurred, infecting 25 people and killing 2. Guess who got caught again and sent back to North Brother Island for good? Mary remained there until she died in 1938. After her death, doctors finally confirmed she had been shedding bacteria through her gallstones the whole time, meaning that gallbladder surgery might have changed everything, but alas, hindsight is 20/20 and Mary was already infamous. But wait, there's more. The General Slocum disaster. Mary wasn't the island's only dark claim to fame. In 1904, 3 years before her arrival, North Brother Island bore witness to one of the deadliest disasters in New York history, the General Slocum tragedy. It all started with a lovely church picnic cruise that quickly turned into a floating nightmare. A fire broke out in the ship's machinery room, and while a 12-year-old boy tried to alert the captain, he was ignored. Seriously, listen to kids. The fire spread like gossip in a small town, straight to a cabin filled with gasoline. The boat eventually sank right at North Brother Island's shore. Over 1,000 people, mostly women and children, perished. Staff and patients from Riverside Hospital tried to help, pulling bodies from the water. The captain was later blamed for not conducting proper fire drills and letting the safety equipment rot like last week's leftovers. But despite the magnitude of the tragedy, it was soon overshadowed by the sinking of the Titanic in 1912. Today, what's left of Riverside Hospital and a dozen eerie buildings sit crumbling in peace. Well, if peace includes overgrown weeds, aggressive ivy, and a suspicious number of birds giving you the side eye. Once a quarantine hospital, then housing for WU2 vets, and later a drug rehab center in the 50s and 60s, Riverside Hospital finally closed in 1964 after staff corruption scandals made it more scandalous than a daytime soap opera. It's been abandoned ever since, marinating in ghost stories and raccoon gossip. Oh, and did we mention the morgue? Yep, because nothing says welcoming island getaway like your own on-site morgue for all the unlucky souls who didn't make it through quarantine. Many believe the island is not just haunted, but cursed. And honestly, looking at its resume, it tracks. Originally used as a landfill, because why not start spooky with a trash pile? The island soon became the go-to destination for contagious patients. The catch? No phones, no visitors, and no return address. Some people sent here were never heard from again. It didn't help that hospital beds were so limited that patients sometimes had to camp in tents, in winter, with no heat, and barely any food. Basically, if you landed here, you were one bad cough away from ghosthood. Now, nature is having a field day reclaiming everything. Trees growing through roofs, vines wrapping around staircases, birds staging secret meetings in the rafters. Despite this overgrown apocalypse vibe, urban explorers say it's a surreal experience. Imagine walking through thick brush, birds chirping above you in a green canopy, sunlight filtering through ruins, and then remembering you're still in the middle of New York City. It's like Central Park's darker, ghostlier cousin. And of course, What would a crumbling, overgrown island with a sketchy past be without some ghostly gossip? Visitors to North Brother Island have reported bone-chilling screams echoing from deep within the ruins of Riverside Hospital. Now, sure, some noise does drift over from Rikers Island, but these screams? Yeah, they're a little too close for comfort, unless ghosts have figured out Uber. Reports also include classic haunted house hits like disembodied whispers, shadowy movements, glowing orbs, and the ever-popular ghost in a hospital gown look. It's basically a supernatural fashion show meets a horror movie, and no one's walking the runway by choice. Some have even spotted the ghostly outline of a boat drifting on the water, because apparently even the boats on this island have unfinished business. If you're brave, or foolish enough to look across the water from Manhattan at night, you might just spot some spooky figures loitering on the shore like they're waiting for a haunted ferry to the afterlife. But before you go packing a flashlight and ghost hunting gear, keep in mind, getting to North Brother Island isn't as simple as booking a spooky Uber. You'll need a boat, official permission from the city, and nerves of steel. The area is heavily patrolled thanks to its neighbor Rikers Island, and trying to sneak in? Bad idea. Between the crumbling ruins, hidden dangers, and NYPD officers who don't share your passion for urban exploring, it's a fast track to a trespassing charge, and possibly a ghostly roommate. So maybe just admire the haunted vibes from the safety of the mainland, or a really long lens. Sitting in Buffalo's Lovejoy neighborhood, the Iron Island Museum is a charmingly spooky spot that has seen more transformations than a ghost at a costume party. Built in 1883 as a Methodist Episcopal church, it later moonlighted as a funeral home, before becoming the museum we know today. In 2000, the building was donated to the Iron Island Preservation Society of Lovejoy, Inc., and since then it has been preserving local history, and, allegedly, a few restless. The museum is a treasure trove of artifacts, showcasing the rich railroad history of the neighborhood, as well as memorabilia from local schools, churches, and military service members. However, it's not just the living who appreciate these exhibits. Visitors and staff have reported a variety of paranormal activities, from unexplained noises to full-on ghostly apparitions. It's like Night at the Museum, but with more ectoplasm. One of the most talked about spirits is Edgar Zernike, whose cremated remains were unclaimed and stored in the basement for years. Apparently, Edgar wasn't thrilled about being left behind and decided to stick around. Then there are the two 6-year-old boys who were waked at the funeral home in the 1960s. Their playful spirits are said to make their presence known, perhaps still seeking the toys they never got. Paranormal investigators have flocked to the museum, with shows like Ghost Hunters and Ghost Lab featuring it in their episodes. During investigations, electronic voice phenomena, EVPs, have captured voices, and visitors have reported hearing a ghostly meow echoing through the halls. The museum offers guided tours and overnight investigations for those brave enough to spend the night. For a fee, you can explore the museum from 7 p.m. to 1 a.m., possibly encountering some of its less corporeal residents. Just remember to bring your own ghost hunting gear and maybe a nightlight. Despite, or perhaps because of its haunted reputation, the Iron Island Museum remains a beloved part of the community. It serves as a reminder of the area's rich history and the stories of those who came before. Plus, it gives locals a great excuse to dress up as Ghostbusters on the weekends. All right, my people, that wraps up part 1 of the most haunted places in New York. And let me tell you, if these spirits had frequent flyer miles for how often they travel between realms, they'd be elite status by now. We've wandered through cemeteries, creaky corridors, and places so haunted even the shadows need therapy. And guess what? We've barely scratched the surface. There is so much more eerie, spine-tingling, keep-you-up-at-night haunted goodness coming your way in part 2. Honestly, after researching and editing this first video, I feel like I just ran a marathon in a haunted asylum. I need a break. So, if anyone's looking for me, I'll be at a Knicks game trying to figure out if the haunting I feel in my soul is from the ghosts or just the team's fourth-quarter defense. But seriously, we've got everything from haunted theaters to cursed hotels, ghost-ridden mansions, and yes, even more abandoned asylums that make The Shining look like a Disney Channel special. If you thought part 1 was wild, part 2 is going to make you sleep with the lights on and your grandma's holy water by your bed. So if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you doing? Are you a ghost yourself? Are you waiting for an apparition to give you permission? Hit that subscribe button like it's a cursed artifact you shouldn't touch, but totally do anyway. Like, come on, do it for the paranormal points. Don't forget to hit that like button too, and definitely leave a comment telling me which haunted place creeped you out the most. Or if you've been to any of them. I want to hear all about it. Alright, I'm off to eat overpriced nachos and emotionally recover. But stay tuned, stay spooky, and keep your eyes peeled for part 2. Because the ghosts of New York are just getting started.